Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. Today I'm doing my RRQ Valorant roster rebuild. This will be my last full rebuild for VCT Pacific. Then we'll go into my recap where I go through the teams that I didn't make 2 or more changes to. So this has been a fairly long series where I've gone through Team Secret, T1, DFM, Zeta, and Talon, all going through their full rosters and giving the rebuild that I think that they should do in real life. So if you're interested in any of those teams, you can go check out those videos and anything like that. Also, leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed. One other note, um, as you can probably tell, my voice is kind of dead right now. I did just go to the Packers Giants game yesterday. So apologies for my voice, but I did really want to get this video out. So yeah, without further ado, let's get right into it. So before we get into the actual roster, we have to get into the 2025 recap and what this team did in this past calendar year. So during the offseason last year, they added Cushy to replace Elmimore, and he pretty much just fully replaced Elmimore on that main scan initiator role alongside Jemkin, Estrella, Munyet, and Zephyro, who were all on the team heading into 2025. They got 7th, 8th at Pacific Kickoff, including that insane game against Nungshim, where they kind of continued their stuff from the year before, where they weren't able to close out these close games. But they then replaced Estrella with Crazy Guy and went 3-2 in stage 1. Had a very solid split overall in terms of the group stage. But then when playoffs showed up, they were awesome, and then they won all of Pacific playoffs, going through, I think, all the way to the upper bracket, like the upper bracket final, semifinal, I think is what it's called, and then down and won like the lower final and then grand final. So overall, really, really good stage 1 from them. But when they got to Masters Toronto, they didn't really show up, especially with the meta changes, which I think was the main thing, but also a little bit of choking as well. They didn't really deal with that very well, and they went 0-2 at Masters Toronto after getting that bye into playoffs. And then when coming around to stage 2, they went 3-2 again, got second in playoffs. They turned up again, just weren't able to beat Paper X in that grand final with the double map ban advantage and stuff like that. Paper X was pretty much always going to win that series. But then going into Champions Paris without a meta change, it really felt like this team choked when they got to that international level yet again. So now getting into the players and contracts we have to work with, this team, honestly, comparatively to most other teams, is very, very simple. We have all 5 players on 2026 contracts, so pretty much we can do whatever we want with them heading into 2026, and their contracts will expire at the end of next year, but for this video, we're not really worried about re-upping players that don't have expiring contracts. So for what we are going to do with this team is we are going to keep Zephyro, Cushy, and Jemkin. I think the best players from this team last year, specifically Cushy and Jemkin, and I think Zephyro was also very consistent. I did consider looking into upgrades potentially for Zephyro, but I just didn't find anybody that I particularly liked. But in terms of Munyet and Crazy Guy's roles, I think I can find significantly better players, at least more consistent ones than those two that could maybe help this team get over the hump in 2026. So overall, I don't know. Crazy Guy, I think, was actually a solid IGL, and specifically in Pacific was a very, very good individual. But when you got to the international events, his individual play just dropped off so significantly that I wasn't like amazed by him, but I do think he's actually a solid IGL, and this year definitely bumped up his stock quite a bit comparatively to last year. And I would very much understand if you would want to keep Crazy Guy heading into next year. I just think the guy that we're bringing in is also a very good IGL and individual that can maybe be a little bit more solid for you throughout the year. And then Munyet, I don't know if this is actually a hot take. I've talked to some people who are super high on Munyet and think he's like a really good player. I actually think the opposite. I think he really forces this team into like one style of play in terms of like the double duelist stuff, and they really don't have as much comp flexibility without that. Like, he can play smokes, and he's actually fairly okay at that. But the duelist stuff, I think, is his best slot, and he's not that great at it either. So, like, he's kind of like okay at both duelist and smokes, but not amazingly good at either one. He'll have pop-off game, pop-off moments, but overall, he's just not a consistent player, and that's what we really need in this team. So now getting into what we need for this team is we'll need a flex player and a controller player. One of them will probably need to be the IGL here, even though I do. There's been some talk about Cushy potentially being an IGL as well, but I don't know as much the inner workings of the team, so that would be kind of hard for me to necessarily predict, and I wouldn't be like jumping at the opportunity to move Cushy to a IGL role where he might be slightly worse, specifically because of how incredible he was last year on that main scan initiator role. So for flex players, I think our options are Shiro, CLZ, and Killua, all within Pacific Tier 1, guys that played last year and were very solid, and we kind of know what we're getting from them. From Tier 2, I didn't really see too much out of flex players necessarily. I didn't go like super deep or anything, so let me know if there's any guys, specifically Indonesian talent, that could be very good in this flex IGL slot as well, because for our IGLs, I also have Shiro in there as well as Kelly S, who are both very solid players in their own right. I think Kelly S had some ups and downs last year, but overall wasn't like horrible for either team that he played for, so he's an interesting player as well. As for controllers, you have Persia, DH, and Mindfreak. All guys, again, that were in Tier 1 last year. There were some Smokes players that I liked, but I think most of them have kind of gone to different teams and stuff like that. So those are kind of our options here, and I think probably the best options for this team in real life as well, especially if they're going into like the get a flex IGL, because those are the two guys available here, and then a controller player that maybe is a little bit more consistent than Munyet. So now heading on to the first player that we will be picking up here, which is Shiro, who was a very solid player for Boom last season, has that VCT experience, which I think we're looking for with players getting picked up here. Maybe in like either the flex or the smokes role, you'd get like an inexperienced guy who's like a cracked tier 2 player or something like that. I think that's something you could maybe look into. But as for Shiro, I think his IGLing and his ability to do that is very important here. And I think the biggest thing with him is his consistency in whatever his role is just very good. He doesn't really have too many awful games. Like he'll have some games that aren't amazing, but he'll still do fine within those games, which I think is kind of what you're looking for to be an upgrade over Crazy Guy individually. And then when you get to an international level, I think he'd be overall fairly solid, but he'll also have very, very good games. And I think that's what you saw at Ascension, where if you look through his run and you take out their final 2 games, I think it was, he has a 1.22 rating, which is unbelievable. 244 ACS, 1.34 KD, 157 ADR, playing like a hard flex. Like obviously he's playing a lot of Yoru, but he's also playing other stuff like the Sage, the Viper, the Sova, all in there. And he was also very good on those agents. So I think overall that is a very good sign for Shiro, looking better, playing like an ever so slightly different role from what he was playing in VCT, and looked so much better. The one thing that would concern me here about Shiro getting picked up is we don't really have that double duelist flexibility with Munyet anymore, and he might struggle a little bit playing like a Yoru op while IGLing, because I don't think he was calling during Boom's Ascension run. That would be kind of weird. Because I would imagine like Francis was doing that, or not Francis, Jesus, I was looking at the other team. Like NC Slasher was doing that because his fragging dropped off quite a bit. So overall, that's kind of what Shiro adds here. I think he overall will just be a solid piece for this team that can be more consistent than Crazy Guy as well as Call. And you don't have to lean into the double duelist stuff with him. I think you can run other stuff, but if they really want to, and they want to run like a Waylay Yoru with Jemkin can op on Waylay. Shiro can play the Yoru while calling, and I think that would be fine because other players have done stuff like that in the past, and it's been overall fine. Heading into our final player here now is Mindfreak, who I think most people know who he is, obviously. Just one of the more decorated smokes players in Pacific, just having tons of success with Paper X, both at a domestic and international level. I think he plays very well within his role and can always be that like calm rock that like keeps his team centered and is like not gonna overheat and throw and like do weird shit in advantaged moments, which I think is also kind of an issue with RRQ at times. It was a bigger issue before, but I think they got better at it this year, but they could get even better at it now with Mindfreak. And I also think they'll need that like international level experience from some of their players, which Mindfreak gives a ton of within this team. He isn't perfect though. I do want to give some like drawbacks on him because I think at times he can be extremely inconsistent, even international, like even regionally. Like I typed here specifically international because every event it feels like he's either playing really badly, like at Shanghai in 2024, or really really well, like at Toronto, or not at Toronto. Jesus, like at Champs 2023, the other event where they did really well more recently. Um, but yeah, he's been kind of up and down on an international level, but he can also be a little bit inconsistent regionally. I think if you take his overall like stage performances and like you put them together, he's fairly consistent. But I think game to game, he can be a little bit inconsistent, which I think is fine for this RRQ team because they have plenty of talent to get through the Pacific region on this team already. So if he can just give them those pop off moments at international events and be good enough throughout playoffs and every stage to get them to every international event, I think overall he'll be very, very good for this team and well worth the pickup over Munyet, especially with the more consistency within his role. So overall, our final team here will be Jemkin, Shiro on the Flex IGL now. Scan will have Cushy coming from last year. We'll have Mindfreak playing on controller now. And then for our Sentinel, we'll have Zephyro. So let me know what you guys think of this roster in the comments below. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.